I hope everyone enjoyed their lunch. The soup was one of my favorites. And we are going to have our dessert treat with Jean Nordhaus. We're grateful that we have so many members of our congregation who are extremely talented, who are what I call scholars in residence and artists in residence, where Jean qualifies for both. She's written several books, 5 books of poetry, 8 books of poetry, 2 regular chapter books, numerous articles that you've. Oh, 8 includes the chapter books. Okay. Numerous articles from the most prestigious magazines that you probably all read. And she's willing to give her time to us to share in her passions. And we're very grateful for that. She's going to talk somewhat about herself and her background and how she came to do what she does. I'm most impressed with her PhD in German from Gale because I did not do well in German many times over. Anyone who could do that, accomplish that, is a star in my eyes. And she's going to be talking to us about Moses Mendelssohn, one of her longtime passions as well. So, welcome, Jean.
Thank you, Jean. When they asked me for a title, I quickly came up with Mendelssohn, the Muse, and Me, because I'm very fond of alliteration. But some of you, when I first joined Temple Micah congregation in 2018, I was invited, I think Barbara Green was invited me to give a reading here from a book I had written of interconnected poems called The Porcelain Apes of Moses Mendelssohn. So for anyone who may have been here before, this is not going to be a reading. This talk will be more about me and how I came to write the book, a book of poems about Mendelssohn, than about Mendelssohn himself. Above all, it's a book about the role of language in his life and in mine, and of course, in Judaism. I suppose if you are here today, you already know something or even a good deal about Moses Mendelssohn, or at least you've heard of him, because he played a role in the story of Reform Judaism, although he remained an Orthodox Jew all his life. But through the example of his work and his life and his fame, he really helped open the doors that allowed Jews to enter the secular lives of the societies in which they were living. And he was an inspiration for the Jewish Enlightenment, the Haskalah, and which ultimately gave rise to Reform Judaism. He was not the founder of Reform Judaism, and he was in no way a Reform Jew. But he was also, as many of you probably also know, the grandfather of the composer Felix Mendelssohn. So we'll start with Mendelssohn. He was born in 1729 in Dessau, which is a city in northeastern Germany. And he was obviously a gifted student. And at the age of 14, he followed his teacher, David Frankel, to Berlin, where Frankel was appointed chief rabbi. Berlin at that time was a city alive with the ideas of the Enlightenment. It was a time of enormous intellectual opening and excitement, scientific exploration, faith in the virtues of human reason, and ideas about religious freedom and tolerance. The same ideas, of course, which underlie the founding documents of this country. So once in Berlin, Mendelssohn was caught up in the intellectual excitement of the era. A secular education was not available or offered in the Orthodox communities he came from. He had to acquire it himself. He was self-taught. He learned French, German, Latin, and Greek, and he studied philosophy and mathematics, and even won a prestigious essay contest where the second place prize went to Immanuel Kant. So the other thing that was so important for his life was he became close friends. Oops, you know what? I forgot all about the slideshow. Pardon me. Hold on. I was so focused on talking. So first of all, we need to see Mendelssohn. And is he up there? Yeah, there. This is what he looked like, Moses. And that's an even nicer picture. I love that one. Okay, so now we get to, this is Gotthold Ephraim Lessing, who was born the same year as Mendelssohn. They were really deep, good friends, and Lessing was the leader of a group of young intellectuals who promoted progress in German literature at a time when most educated Germans wrote in French, and German was not considered an appropriate language for serious literary work. In 1757, with Lessing's help, Mendelssohn became the first Jew to publish a book in the German language. The book was called Phaedon, on the immortality of souls. It was it was really a free translation of Plato's dialogue and maintained the dialogue form and the gracefulness of the dialogue form, but he had updated it with ideas from the new Enlightenment philosophers. The book was a huge success and was translated into many languages. Travelers from all over Europe, when they came to Berlin, would come and pay their respects to Mendelssohn because, of course, it was so curious and it was very curious. He was an anomaly, this Jew, and he'd written this wonderful book. So they called him the German Socrates and the German Plato. He was a rock star of his time, I suppose. His fame, however, was a mixed blessing because it made him a target for religious zealots and got him embroiled in a very public controversy with a man named Johann Caspar Lavater. And this is Lavater up here. You can see he has a shady look, right? So Lavater was a Swiss cleric. He was a mystic. He was a phrenologist. He studied people's skulls to sort of tell what their character was going to be like. It was sort of a little bit of a charlatan. He was rather respected at his time. Anyway, he was eager to enhance his own reputation by making a famous convert. So he translated a book arguing that the truth of Christianity was proved by Jesus's miracles, and that's an oversimplification, and I have never read that book. But he dedicated his translation to Mendelssohn, challenging him to refute the arguments of the book, or else he would obviously have to convert. Needless to say, this created a very delicate situation for Mendelssohn, and he extricated himself with dignity, but not without some trauma. So it was very painful and difficult time for him. Okay, that's the Mendelssohn part. Now me, leaping, oh, wait a minute, I skipped a whole chapter of myself. Let's see. Okay. Me, okay. This may take a while. So I grew up in a religiously agnostic, highly talkative, liberal Jewish home in Baltimore. My parents were first generation. Their parents were born abroad, so much emphasis on being American. My mother, however, spoke Yiddish with her mother and sisters, And I remember listening as a child and being just amazed that these wonderful sounds were coming out. They were very boisterous and lively, my mother and her sisters, and it was gobbledygook. And it made no sense at all, but it was just fabulous. And they seemed to understand each other and communicate. So I was fascinated by foreign languages in general. In high school, we had to make a choice between French and German. So I chose German since Yiddish is partially a dialect of German, hoping it would help me understand my mother and her sisters. And my mother was quite sympathetic. She had studied German herself in school, but my father, like many Jews in those years, so soon after the Holocaust, had no use for anything German. In college, moving on, I studied philosophy. I was a philosophy major, but I continued taking German courses. And I eventually ended up studying German literature in graduate school. And it was there in graduate school and not at all through Jewish sources that I first encountered Moses Mendelssohn, because he had played a small role in the history of German literature. One of the things he did was he wrote a book review of a book of poems that Frederick the Great had published in French, and he scolded Frederick the Great for writing in French rather than in German. So, Lessing, you remember Lessing? I don't need to go back there. They're all just gentlemen in gray wigs. Lessing, in tribute to his noble friend, wrote a play in 1779 called Nathan the Wise. Whoops. Oh, wait, I forgot. Sorry, I'm not really used to working with slides, but I want to go back to Lavater for a minute and Mendelssohn's Dispute, because this is a painting done by a Jewish artist in the 19th century, which depicts Mendelssohn, Lessing, Mendelssohn, Lessing, and Lavater at a table arguing. And if you look, they're arguing over a book there. So it's sort of a picture of Lavater trying to convert Moses. And okay, here we go. So this is the play that Lessing wrote. It was never performed in his lifetime, but it is very popular today. Frequently performed. It was a powerful case, presented a powerful plea for religious tolerance. And the major characters were a sultan, a crusader, and a Jew, the title character Nathan. And everyone assumes that the character of Nathan was based on Moses. So, okay, back to me. Leaping forward, do I have any more pictures to remember to put up? I don't know. What's coming next? Oh, yeah, okay. I'll leave you to guess who she is. That's not me. I have met a woman. I'm married. I have 2 children. I'm living in Washington. I've started writing poetry. And I met a woman named Carla Hübner who ran a concert series. It was what was then Mount Vernon Junior College, I think it was. And she asked me to provide some pre-concert remarks. She knew I had a background in German, and on an upcoming program she was doing on German Romanticism. And the first half of the program consisted of pieces by all the regulars, Schumann and Brahms. I don't remember exactly who was on the program, but the second half began with a piece by Fanny Mendelssohn, Felix's lesser known but equally talented younger sister. And since I didn't know anything at all about Fanny, I went to the Library of Congress, which was right down the street from me, and I checked out a big fat book called The Mendelssohn Family, which was written by Fanny Mendelssohn's son, Sebastian. And like all histories of the Mendelssohn family, it began with grandfather Moses, Fanny's grandfather, Moses Mendelssohn. And I was kind of zing, yes, I'd heard of him, Um, and that kind of a coincidence when separate things come together, when you meet someone and you know that you both knew this other person, um, it's a little like what happens in metaphor. It's like the charge that comes when you see the link between a pretty girl and a red, red rose, or a bull and a stock market, right? So researching the Mendelssohn family, back to the book, I learned a lot about the restrictions that were placed on Jews living in Germany in the 18th century. Some of this I knew only abstractly, but this made it much more vivid. Uh, Jews were only allowed to enter the city through the one single, the city had many gates, but they were only allowed to enter through the gate that animals were allowed to come through. And they were not allowed to own land. Moses Mendelssohn needed a special permit even to live in Berlin. And in the course of reading this book, I came across a paragraph which ultimately became the epigraph of my book. It's called, I'm just going to read it to you. Under Frederick the Great, every Jew had to purchase on the occasion of his marriage a certain amount of china from the newly established Royal China Factory in Berlin, and that not by his own choice, but by that of the factory manager who made use of the opportunity. Oh, here come the best pictures. He made use of the opportunity to get rid of otherwise unsaleable things. Thus, Moses Mendelssohn, a man even then generally known and honored, became possessed of 20 life-size china apes, some of which are still preserved in the family, or at least were at this time. So, I mean, these are just phenomenal, these pieces. They're still on the market. You can buy them for many thousands of dollars. Um, Frederick the Great was trying to set up a competition with the city of Meissen. So he wanted his own China factory, but not too many people wanted the life-sized apes. So when I read this passage about the apes, I immediately put the book down and started scribbling notes for poems that would stand in for apes. Each would represent one of the specific burdens Mendelssohn had to contend with in his lifetime. He was poor, he had a stammer, and many things. So what struck home, of course, was the idea that the enemy, the disrespected human, is portrayed as an animal. And it brought to mind the Nazi cartoons in which Jews were presented as rats. And of course, you couldn't ask for a more current example than Trump's recent Truth Social video of the Obamas as apes. So to summarize, writing poetry for me when it's going well is an act of synthesis. It's sort of a faith that everything is connected. And when I started working on this book, things from all over my life and experience, which had never quite seemed to cohere in a particularly meaningful way, suddenly made sense. Yiddish, philosophy, my family life, the German language, the Holocaust, personal elements as well. Everything was connected and everything was useful. I realized too how deeply my Jewishness factored into this mix. We were a people united by a book. Moses Mendelssohn was the first Jew to write a book in German, and I too could write a book and be part of that tradition. So writing the Porcelain Apes of Moses Mendelssohn had become a way for me as a writer to embrace my heritage. And I'm going to close by reading the opening poem of the book. Oh, and there's one more picture. I'm sorry, Phil set this up so beautifully, and I'm just not used to doing this. I'm used to talking. We were big talkers in my family, so. Okay, so this is the Rosenthal Gate, and the name of the poem, if I can hold the mic and turn pages at the same time. it's not so easy here. No, I've got it. Yeah, well, no, you don't have to, don't bother. I'll get it set up so I can, I've got it, Bill. He enters Berlin through the Rosenthal gate. Far easier for a rich man to enter heaven. Say you've been walking for days, 14 years old, a brimming cup, away from Dessau and the ghetto, everything you know. You follow your teacher, a hunger, a love, with your bad shoes, a stammer, a slight hump. Will you be the camel that squeezes through? Suppose you've been walking all night and you come to that gate. All the rest are closed to you. New sun striking ancient stone, so bright it blinds. Now set a sentry in your path, a sphinx who questions you. Parable insists on this, though what she asks, what you reply, will not survive. And what to set above that portal on the doorpost of your story? How shall I enter, a Jew, through words, the only opening? May they be acceptable. In the Century Book of 1743 is written, today there passed through the Rosenthal gate 6 oxen, 7 swine, and 1 Jew. Thank you. Oh, and I brought a few books with me. And Jerry has them over there. I brought very few. I only brought 4, and 2 have already been sold. But they're offered for $10 to donate to the Lunch and Learn. So. Okay.
Okay,
Here I am. Okay.
there you are. I have a microphone. If you raise your hand, Jean will acknowledge you, and I'll bring you the microphone to ask the
Okay.
question.
Oh. Jerry's there.
Actually, I have one from Ruth Schimmel on the Zoom. She says, given the rational essence of the Enlightenment, I wonder how Mendelssohn addressed the power of emotion in his writing.
I don't think that the Enlightenment was against emotion. They just felt that that reason was equally important and that there was a balance. And I cannot pretend to be an expert on all of Mendelssohn's writings. He did, I know, after his dispute with Lavater, he sort of turned himself to Jewish issues and wrote about Judaism as a religion that was consonant with reason, but that did not exclude emotion, to my knowledge. Yeah. Barbara.
I'm getting my steps in. Barbara Diskin, I wanted to know if Moses was still alive when Fanny was born, and how, if he was not, would he have supported her as a musician? Because I know her own father did not support her very well.
Well, her father was very supportive of his son. He was just less supportive of, it was just thought that a woman belonged in the home, and it was disgraceful for a woman to be out in public and have a public life. I do not know. Let's see, Mendelssohn died in he was 56, 1787, I believe. And So I don't know when Fanny was born, so, yeah. But one of you can whip out your cell phone and find a Barbara.
So isn't it the case that Felix Mendelssohn converted?
Oh, yes.
And therefore his daughter, his sister would have been a convert. So was Mendelssohn still alive? And what was his response to that?
Again, I do not know that.
Oh.
Yeah, yeah.
I just wanted to, I was always told that Felix Mendelssohn's father converted.
Abraham
Yeah,
converted
converted
his
the
children.
children, yeah.
Yeah, right.
Terry, do you have?
I do have one, a hard one, actually. It's from Lila Suna, and she wants to know, knowing Mendelssohn's philosophy, what do you think his thoughts would be on modern Israel?
Whoa! I do not pretend to be a scholar of Mendelssohn. He was a humanist. I think that he believed in all faiths. I don't think, I mean, it was almost sort of before the kind of nationalism that emerged in the 19th century. And so I can't imagine that he would be pleased with Israel as it exists now. He might have been sympathetic to the Israel of the founders, but he certainly would have made a very ample place for those of other religions. Yeah, and he was a great humanist. I mean, he was a believer in people. So, yeah.
Hi, I'm Deborah
Deborah,
Burke.
right.
Yes, back to the me of your talk. Will you tell us a little about your other books, the other
Oh,
7 books?
yeah. My first book was called A Language of Hands. I seem to be into of in most of my titles. The other books that I've written have been on various themes having to do with many times of my life, but I've never written another book. There were various poems on various subjects and sections in each book about particular, family, childhood, etc. But this is the only book I've written which has an overarching theme for all the poems in the book. The second one was A Language of a Bracelet of Lies. And my most recent book was published by Broadstone Books, and that I'm struggling for the title, but that included poems about my husband's death. So they're the different books from different periods of my life, and so reflect those experiences. Yeah.
Just a moment.
Helen, yeah.
Hi, I'm Helen Epps. Your talk was called Mendelssohn, the Muse, and Me. You spoke about Mendelssohn. You spoke about the me. Could you speak a little more about the Muse?
Well, I thought I was doing it, although perhaps too subtly when in my comment
I guess subtlety isn't working on me.
about metaphor. I didn't want to get too, well, it's just that I was inspired, but what inspired me here was things coming together. It was suddenly the ability to pull together things that had felt very separate. So that is a large part of what the Muse is for me, is sort of seeing connections in the world, seeing how things fit together. Yeah.
One of our researchers just pointed out that Fanny was born after her grandpa died.
Okay.
So he couldn't have reacted.
So
with her.
and maybe Moses wouldn't have known that Abraham was going to convert them. So, which is a comfort actually. So, but Abraham believed in. But Moses believed in the unity of man. That all men were equal. So, he might not have been as upset as I'm imagining him. Anything else?
Jeff
Hi.
Barron, hi.
Hi.
Can you tell us about your books that are not poetry books? What the
I
subject?
don't have any books that are not poetry.
No, I thought you said they were.
There were
some-
Jean said chapter books, but they're not. Chapter books are different from chap books. Chapter books are prose books with individual chapters, and chap books that's a derivation from cheap books. They're little books, so these are slender books. They're not full length. And the two chap books that I have each contain poems which then reappeared in the full length books. And a full length book of poetry is about 60, 70 pages these days, unless it's a new and selected,
I wanted to note that even though the Mendelssohn family was converted, there were a lot of themes, Jewish themes in their music.
Thank you. Please tell us more.
I remember singing a few years ago lots of music from Fanny and Felix, and it was noted that those Jewish things were there, whether they still were Jews or not.
Yeah, and of course, the church music, if there were psalms and things drawn from the Old Testament, there would naturally
It was a
have been.
conversion of convenience, I think.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Before Moses, a Jew really couldn't function in the world, in the public world. You are really working hard there.
Hi, I'm Jane Kirshner.
Hi, Jane.
I'm wondering what you're working on now.
I'm working day to day on individual poems, just things that come up, rise. And I think I won't know until I put another book together exactly. That's the moment of discovery when you say, well, what have I been working on? And then you see, this is.
That's when the muse goes to work.
Well,
Put
it's
it all
like
together.
writing an additional poem is putting together, you look at the poems you've written and you say, how do these relate? How are these connected? What are the underlying themes? And that helps to combine them. So it is, as I say, it's a process of putting things together. Yeah.
Thank you.